The classroom's bright, sterile white revealed every detail with stark clarity, interrupted only by the faint hum of alien machinery and the shifting murmurs of anticipation from its diverse occupants. The brilliant young minds from the Galactic Consortium's Interstellar Academy leaned forward, some shifting their gelatinous forms or twitching their branch-like appendages, their anticipation palpable as they observed the proceedings. Their appearances varied widely, a testament to the diversity of the consortium. Some students had iridescent scales that shimmered with every shift of light, others had gelatinous forms that pulsed gently, while a few resembled sentient trees with their branching appendages twitching with anticipation. Today's experiment marked the apex of countless hours spent fine-tuning instruments and debating hypotheses, each step driven by the tantalizing promise of unraveling the mystery behind human resilience. Professor Valthick, a towering insectoid with compound eyes that sparkled like shattered glass, clacked his mandibles together in excitement. Students, today we delve into one of the most perplexing phenomena in the known universe, the human capacity for pain tolerance. At the mention of humans, a collective murmur rippled through the class. One crystalline student whispered to their companion, "Humans. They're unpredictable, volatile, but somehow, they endure. It's baffling." Another nodded, their translucent form shimmering. "Resilience. It's like it's embedded in their core, isn't it?" The consortium's recent admission of humanity into its fold had been met with equal parts curiosity and apprehension. The central focus of today's lesson was a single human, seated calmly in the observation chamber. His name was Lieutenant Jack Carter, a volunteer from Earth's diplomatic corps. Surrounded by alien technology and scrutinizing extraterrestrial gazes, he reclined with an easy smile, radiating calm. A translator device embedded in his ear glowed faintly, ensuring he understood every word. Professor Valthick gestured toward him with one spindly arm. "Lieutenant Carter has generously offered to participate in a controlled study of pain perception and tolerance. The purpose of this experiment is to observe and quantify the unique neurological and physiological responses of humans to various stimuli." One of the students, a crystalline being named Clyrix, raised a shimmering appendage. "Professor, are we certain this is safe? Human emotional volatility is well documented. What if the subject becomes aggressive?" Jack chuckled, his voice carrying a tone of easy confidence. "Don't worry about me. I've been through worse." This statement elicited puzzled glances among the students. Worse? The very idea seemed improbable. Consortium species typically avoided pain at all costs, viewing it as a dangerous and unnecessary experience. To voluntarily endure it, let alone casually dismiss its significance, was utterly alien. The first test was mild, a gentle electrical pulse designed to mimic the sensation of a static shock. Jack barely flinched, his expression unchanged. The students murmured among themselves, taking meticulous notes as data scrolled across their individual holoscreens. "Fascinating," Professor Valthick observed. "The subject's neural responses indicate an awareness of the stimulus, yet his physiological indicators remain remarkably stable. Let us increase the intensity." The next pulse was stronger, akin to the sharp sting of a bee. Jack winced slightly but remained composed, his breathing steady. "That's starting to get interesting," he remarked with a wry grin. By now, the students' curiosity was giving way to something more profound. They exchanged wide-eyed glances, their voices hushed as they debated in disbelief. "How does he withstand this?" one crystalline being whispered. Another student, their branch-like appendages trembling slightly, muttered, "It's as if pain has no hold on him, or perhaps something greater drives him." The students whispered in astonishment, their notes momentarily forgotten. "He's not even breaking a sweat," one murmured, while another's appendages twitched nervously, their crystalline surface dimming in disbelief. They had anticipated dramatic displays of distress, perhaps even a plea for mercy. Instead, he remained unshaken, his demeanor almost casual. The experiments continued, each one escalating in intensity. Sweat glistened on Jack's forehead as his muscles tensed, a fleeting grimace betraying the strain, yet his steady gaze and calm demeanor held firm, defying the escalating discomfort. He joked occasionally, his humor disarming the students even as they struggled to comprehend his fortitude. Subject demonstrates an extraordinary capacity to compartmentalize pain, Professor Valthick noted, his mandibles clicking in thought. This raises intriguing questions about the evolutionary pressures that shaped human neurology. Lieutenant Carter, how would you describe your experience thus far? Jack's grin widened. Honestly, feels like a Tuesday. The students exchanged bewildered glances. What is a Tuesday? One of them whispered. Before Professor Valthick could elaborate, the next phase of the experiment began. This time, the stimulus involved thermal exposure. A panel beneath Jack's chair emitted a controlled burst of heat, equivalent to touching a hot surface. Jack hissed through his teeth but quickly recovered, his expression calm once more. Impressive, Professor Valthick said, antennae twitching. Such resilience suggests an unusual interplay between human nociceptors and cortical processing centers. Students, observe the subject's hormonal output. Notice how cortisol levels spike momentarily before stabilizing. Clerics, still skeptical, leaned forward. Lieutenant Carter, do all humans possess this level of tolerance? Jack's gaze flicked toward the crystalline student, his eyes gleaming with amusement. Not exactly. Some of us handle it better than others. But when it matters, yeah, we're tougher than we look. The experiment escalated further as the vibrations deepened, resonating through Jack's body with an unnerving intensity. The students exchanged uneasy glances, their crystalline and scaled forms shifting in silent apprehension, while some frantically adjusted their data screens, tracking his unyielding vitals with disbelief. A simulation of sharp pressure, designed to mimic the sensation of being pricked by a needle, elicited a brief grimace from Jack. But even then, he maintained his composure, offering a casual thumbs up to the observing students. As the session progressed, something remarkable began to happen. The students' initial detachment, their clinical fascination with an alien subject, gave way to a deeper sense of awe. Jack's ability to endure what they considered unbearable was not merely a curiosity, it was a testament to a kind of strength they had never encountered. By the time the final test was announced, the atmosphere in the room was tense. The students leaned forward, their attention riveted on the human in the observation chamber. This test would simulate prolonged discomfort, a combination of low-frequency vibrations and subdermal pressure. Jack braced himself as the machinery activated. The sensation was unpleasant, a grinding ache that seemed to burrow beneath his skin. His jaw tightened, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests of his chair. Yet he endured, his gaze fixed firmly ahead. Minutes passed, each one stretching into an eternity. The students watched in stunned silence, their disbelief mounting with every second. Finally, the machinery powered down, the vibrations ceasing. Jack exhaled slowly, his body relaxing. That, he said with a lopsided grin, was a little rough. The room erupted into chatter. The students' voices overlapped as they debated the implications of what they had witnessed. For a species to endure such conditions without breaking, it defied everything they understood about biology and psychology. Most consortium beings would have already succumbed, their neural pathways overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the pain. Professor Valthick raised a clawed hand, silencing the room. His multifaceted eyes fixed on Jack. Lieutenant Carter, you have provided us with invaluable insight into the human condition. Your resilience is extraordinary. But I must ask, why? What drives your kind to endure such hardship? Jack's expression softened, a rare flicker of earnestness crossing his face. It's not just about enduring. It's about what's at stake. We push through pain because there's always something worth fighting for: our families, our friends, our future. Pain reminds us we're alive, and as long as we're alive, we've got a shot at making things better. Like when I was trapped under that collapsed building back home, it hurt like hell, but I kept going because I knew my team was counting on me. The room fell silent. The students' notes lay forgotten as they absorbed Jack's words. In that moment, the human capacity for resilience was no longer an abstract concept. It was a living, breathing testament to a kind of strength that transcended biology. As the session concluded, the students filed out of the room, their expressions ranging from contemplative to visibly shaken. Clerics paused at the door, glancing back at Jack. You are not what we expected, they admitted. But perhaps that is why your kind is so remarkable. Jack offered a two-fingered salute. Stick around. We're full of surprises. When the door finally closed, Jack leaned back in his chair, letting out a low whistle. Man, he muttered to himself, they're going to have a lot to talk about at dinner tonight. The classroom buzzed with a palpable shift in energy as the experiment entered its next phase. A crystalline student's appendages shimmered faintly as they adjusted their position, while a scaled classmate's tail flicked nervously against the floor, betraying the growing anticipation in the room. The students, now deeply invested, clustered closer to their observation consoles. The curiosity in their multifaceted eyes had evolved into something sharper, a mix of respect and fascination, tempered by an underlying unease. None among them had anticipated the sheer scale of human resilience demonstrated so far. What more could this species possibly endure? Prepare yourselves, students, Professor Valthick intoned, his mandibles clicking rhythmically. We are now escalating beyond mere thresholds of discomfort. The stimuli we are about to apply are calibrated to elicit extreme neural responses, bordering on the limits of what organic systems can withstand. Lieutenant Carter, are you ready? Jack leaned forward in his chair, wiping sweat from his brow. His calm exterior wavered briefly, a flicker of exhaustion crossing his face before he steadied himself with a determined breath. Ready when you are, Professor. The students exchanged glances. To them, Jack's confidence bordered on hubris. No sentient being they knew, not even the most robust warriors of the consortium's militarized species, had ever faced such conditions without severe consequences. They braced themselves for the inevitable collapse. The machinery surrounding Jack hummed softly, faint lights pulsing across the sterile chamber as it initiated the next trial. The first new stimulus was a simulated gravitational compression, designed to replicate the crushing force of a high-gravity environment. The sensation would feel as though his body were being compacted under an immense weight. Jack's muscles visibly strained, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the armrests of his chair. His breathing grew labored, yet his expression remained defiant. He let out a low grunt but managed a quip through gritted teeth. Is this supposed to be heavy? The crystalline student clyrix's appendages flickered with agitation. Professor, his vitals are stabilizing faster than predicted. This is highly irregular. Professor Valthick's antennae twitched as he scrutinized the data streams. Indeed. Neural feedback suggests adaptive regulation of stress hormones. Lieutenant Carter, could you describe the sensation? Jack's voice was strained but steady. It's like being pinned under a truck. Hurts like hell, but nothing I can't manage. The room erupted in murmurs. To endure such a stimulus and dismiss it with casual humor was beyond their comprehension. Yet Jack's ordeal was far from over. The compression subsided, only for a new challenge to take its place, a bioelectric simulation designed to mimic sustained nerve damage. As the simulation began, Jack stiffened, his jaw clenching. This time, there were no jokes. His breathing grew shallow, sweat pouring down his face as every nerve in his body seemed to ignite. The students leaned in, their discomfort evident. For all their academic detachment, this was difficult to watch. His tolerance is remarkable, murmured a scaled student, their tail coiling reflexively. But this cannot be sustainable. Clyrix's crystalline surface dimmed with concern. Professor, should we intervene? No, Professor Valthick replied, though his tone was less certain than before. The subject retains cognitive coherence. Lieutenant Carter, do you wish to continue? Jack's eyes opened, bloodshot but steady. Yeah. Don't stop now. The students were stunned. Among their species, pain at this magnitude would have triggered a cascade of autonomic shutdowns. Yet here was a human, not only enduring but choosing to persist. The next phase was psychological. The machinery shifted focus, targeting Jack's neural pathways with simulated isolation, a form of sensory deprivation designed to erode mental stability. The lights dimmed, and a heavy silence filled the room as the chamber around Jack plunged into simulated darkness and solitude. His vital signs, displayed prominently on the students' screens, flickered with subtle irregularities. For the first few minutes, Jack sat motionless, his breathing steady. But as the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the tension became visible. His fingers tapped a rhythm on the armrest, a habit born of an unconscious need to anchor himself. The students observed intently, their screens lighting up with neural activity patterns they had never seen before. His mind is resisting disassociation, clerics noted, or lacing their usually clinical tone. It's as though he's creating mental constructs to combat the isolation. Most species would succumb rapidly, their neural pathways overwhelmed, but he seems to be actively reshaping the experience to maintain coherence. Mental constructs, another student echoed, their gelatinous form rippling with confusion. Jack's voice broke the silence, startling them. You ever try singing your favorite song in your head when you're bored? Works wonders. The students' amazement deepened. To them, such simple strategies seemed primitive, yet the results were undeniable. Jack's heart rate steadied, his neural patterns adapting in ways their models couldn't predict. The deprivation ended abruptly, and Jack blinked against the returning light, a brief shudder running through his body as he exhaled sharply, his fingers gripping the armrests for a moment longer than necessary. He looked weary but far from broken. That was unpleasant, he admitted. But I've had worse waiting in line at the DMV. Several students exchanged puzzled glances. What is a DMV? One of them whispered. The final test loomed, and the tension in the room reached its peak. This would be the most grueling yet, a full-spectrum sensory overload. The chamber was calibrated to assault every one of Jack's senses simultaneously, blinding light, deafening sound, and chaotic tactile stimuli. Even the air was infused with an overwhelming array of scents and tastes, each more jarring than the last. Jack's body convulsed as the onslaught began. His hands gripped the armrests with such force that his knuckles turned white. His teeth clenched, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. The students could barely watch, their own bodies recoiling in sympathetic discomfort. Yet Jack endured. Each second felt like an eternity, his mind cycling through memories of past struggles like the grueling night he spent pulling a trapped teammate from a burning wreckage, ignoring the searing heat and his own injuries. Times when giving up wasn't an option. The ache in his muscles and the sharp flashes of pain became background noise compared to the unyielding voice in his head. Keep going. They're watching. Show them what we're made of. His vital signs fluctuated wildly, but he refused to yield. When the machinery finally powered down, an eerie silence filled the room. Jack slumped back in his chair, his chest heaving, his face pale but triumphant. Professor Valthick stepped forward, his compound eyes reflecting Jack's exhausted form, while the students behind him exchanged hushed whispers and nervous glances. A crystalline student dimmed to a dull glow, their appendages quivering in astonishment, while a scaled student muttered under their breath, "How is this even possible?" The charged silence amplified their disbelief. "Lieutenant Carter, your performance today has been enlightening. But tell me, what compels you to endure such trials?" Jack's lips curled into a faint smile, his voice hoarse but resolute. "We don't give up, Professor. Not when it matters. That's just how we're wired." The room remained silent as the students processed his words, their crystalline surfaces dimming in thought and scaled tails twitching in contemplation. A few exchanged glances, their eyes betraying a mix of awe and unease, while one quietly murmured, "Resilience, it's beyond anything we've encountered." For the first time, they glimpsed the intangible force that defined humanity, a resilience born not of biology alone, but of choice, determination, and something deeper. As Jack was escorted out for medical evaluation, the students lingered in the observation room, their perspectives forever altered. One by one, they began to speak, their voices tinged with newfound respect. "Perhaps," clerics mused, "we underestimated them." Or, another replied, "They're simply more than we can comprehend." The air in the observation room was thick with tension, punctuated by the faint hum of machinery and the occasional rustle of an uneasy appendage against a console. Some students leaned forward, their crystalline forms shimmering with faint pulses of light, while others shifted restlessly, their scales rippling in nervous anticipation. The students, usually so composed and analytical, now sat in silence, their gazes fixed on the chamber where Jack Carter remained. His face was pale, his breathing labored, But his eyes, those fierce, unyielding eyes, shone with a determination that defied comprehension. Professor Valthick stood at the console, his antennae twitching as he analyzed the data streams pouring in. The results were unprecedented, the neural and physiological responses charting a course that no other species had ever demonstrated. "Students," he began, his voice reverberating in the silence, "we are witnessing an anomaly. The human has not only survived every phase of our trial but continues to adapt at a rate that challenges our understanding of sentient biology. For example, his neural feedback loops appear to recalibrate under stress, enabling him to anticipate and counteract new stimuli with unprecedented precision." Clyrix's crystalline surface flickered faintly as they leaned forward. "Professor, what is left to test? Surely, we've reached the limits of even human endurance." Valthick's compound eyes turned toward the chamber. "There is one final trial. It is designed not merely to test physical or psychological resilience but to probe the very essence of willpower. It is the Forge Protocol." The room erupted into whispers, fragments of disbelief and/or filling the air. "The Forge," one student murmured, their appendages quivering. "No one survives that intact." Another added, "Does he even understand what he's agreeing to?" The Forge Protocol was a legendary test among the consortium, employed sparingly due to its intensity. Stories circulated of elite warriors crumbling under its relentless demands, their minds and bodies unable to cope with the simulated extremes. It simulated catastrophic scenarios that overwhelmed both the body and the mind, pushing subjects to their breaking point. No one had ever completed it unscathed. Most failed outright. Jack's voice crackled through the intercom, breaking the students' murmurs. "So, what's next? You've got that look, Professor. The one that says things are about to get interesting." Valthick hesitated for the briefest moment before addressing him. "Lieutenant Carter, the final trial is the Forge Protocol. You are under no obligation to proceed. Its parameters are extreme." Jack's lips curled into a faint smirk. "Extreme? Sounds like my kind of challenge. Let's do it." The students' eyes widened, their appendages twitching with unease. Even Clyrix, who had grown increasingly fascinated with the human, looked doubtful. "Professor, surely you will not allow this. The Forge has never been attempted by an unacclimated subject." "He has chosen," Valthick said solemnly. "We will proceed." The chamber transformed. The walls shimmered as holographic projectors activated, casting jagged shadows that flickered like lightning strikes across the floor. A low, ominous hum filled the space, resonating through the chamber as an oppressive heat began to radiate, making the air shimmer like a mirage. Jagged landscapes formed, crackling with energy, while oppressive heat radiated through the chamber. Jack's chair dissolved into the floor, leaving him standing alone in this manufactured nightmare. His fists clenched instinctively, muscles taut as his eyes scanned the hostile environment. A flicker of defiance crossed his face, his stance shifting into one of readiness, as though daring the Forge to challenge him. A voice, synthetic and devoid of emotion, echoed through the space. "Forge Protocol initiated. Objective, survive." The first wave struck without warning, sending a jolt of panic through Jack as the ground beneath him erupted violently. His legs buckled under the force, and his breath hitched as shards of simulated rock sliced through the air. A sharp sting on his arm told him he'd been grazed, but he forced himself to roll clear, heart pounding as he braced for the next attack. The ground beneath Jack's feet erupted, sending him sprawling as shards of simulated rock tore through the air. He rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding a cascade of debris, and scrambled to his feet. The heat was suffocating, each breath a struggle, but he pressed forward, scanning the environment for any semblance of shelter. The students watched in stunned silence. "How is he still standing?" One crystalline being murmured, their glow dimmed to a faint shimmer. Another student, their scaled tail flicking anxiously, whispered, "I've never seen anything like this, he's unstoppable." The Forge was a crucible, designed to exploit every weakness. Yet Jack moved with purpose, his every action calculated. When a swarm of predatory constructs descended from the skies, he grabbed a jagged piece of rock and wielded it like a makeshift club, striking with brutal efficiency. His movements were not graceful, But they were effective, born of desperation and instinct. Where other species might hesitate or falter under such relentless conditions, Jack adapted with a raw tenacity that turned every obstacle into an opportunity for survival. His improvising, Clyrix whispered, their voice tinged with awe. None of our models account for this level of adaptability. Valthic's antennae twitched. It is not merely adaptability. It is a refusal to succumb. Humans appear to possess an intrinsic drive to overcome, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The trial escalated. A simulated storm erupted, bolts of energy striking the ground with deafening force. Jack's movements slowed as exhaustion began to take its toll. He stumbled, his knees buckling, but caught himself before falling. Completely. His chest heaved, his sweat-drenched face a mask of grim determination. "This is inhumane," one student muttered, their gelatinous form rippling with distress. "He volunteered," Clyrix replied, though their crystalline glow dimmed in sympathy. "And he is still fighting." Jack's voice cut through the chaos, startling the observers. A crystalline student recoiled slightly, their glow dimming in shock, while a scaled peer whispered, his taunting the forge. "Incredible. Is this all you've got?" he shouted, his tone defiant despite his obvious fatigue. "Come on. Show me what's next." The forge obliged. The storm intensified, and the ground itself seemed to rebel, splitting open to reveal a chasm filled with molten energy. Jack staggered but forced himself forward, leaping across the fissure with a roar of effort. He landed hard on the other side, rolling to absorb the impact, and rose shakily to his feet. Inside the observation room, the students were transfixed. Clyrix leaned closer to the monitor, their voice barely audible. His not just enduring. His defying. The final stage of the trial began. The environment shifted once more, morphing into a void of complete darkness. Jack stood still, his breaths echoing in the oppressive silence, each inhale a ragged reminder of the weight pressing down on him, while the void seemed to amplify the sound, making it almost deafening. Then the voice returned. "Forge protocol, psychological override. Subject will confront core fears." Images flickered into existence around Jack, phantoms from his past. The faces of fallen comrades, the echoes of their voices accusing him of failure. The weight of every mistake, every regret, bore down on him. Jack dropped to one knee, his hands clutching his head as the illusions closed in, a torrent of emotions surging through him. Guilt clawed at his mind, each phantom's face a reminder of sacrifices and failures he could never undo. His breathing turned ragged, the weight of the memories nearly unbearable, but somewhere beneath the anguish, a flicker of defiance began to stir. This is cruel," one student whispered, their voice trembling. Valthic's expression was unreadable, his antennae frozen in place. "It is the forge," he said quietly. "It reveals the essence of its subject." For a moment, it seemed as though Jack might break. His body shuddered, his breaths ragged. But then, slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes, bloodshot and filled with unshed tears, locked onto the illusions. "You're not real," he growled. "And even if you were, you wouldn't stop me." The phantoms faltered, their forms flickering. Jack pushed himself to his feet, his stance steady despite the crushing weight of the memories. "You don't get to define me," he said, his voice low but resolute. "I do." The illusions shattered, the void dissolving into light. Jack stood alone, battered but unbroken, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion yet his chin lifted in quiet triumph. His clenched fists slowly relaxed, and a faint, weary smile crossed his face as the forge protocol deactivated. The chamber returned to its original state, and he collapsed to his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion. In the observation room, the students were silent. Clyrix's crystalline form shimmered faintly as they spoke. "He completed it." "The forge." Valthic nodded slowly, his antennae drooping. "Indeed. Lieutenant Carter has shown us something extraordinary. Not merely resilience, but a will that defies even the harshest trials." Jack's voice, hoarse but unyielding, crackled through the intercom. "So, did I pass?" The students stared at the monitor, there or palpable. A crystalline being's surface flickered erratically, a visible manifestation of their amazement, while a scaled student's tail twitched nervously as they murmured, "I can't believe he survived this." For the first time, they understood the depth of human endurance, a force that was not just physical but profoundly emotional, driven by an unrelenting determination to overcome. The observation room remained steeped in silence as Jack Carter's image lingered on the monitor. His exhausted, triumphant figure had etched itself into the minds of every student present. For the first time in their academic careers, they were at a loss for words. Professor Valthick finally broke the quiet, his tone reverent. "Students, what we have witnessed today will be studied for generations. Lieutenant Carter has not merely passed the Forge Protocol, he has redefined the parameters of resilience. Humanity has proven to possess a depth of willpower that transcends our understanding." The crystalline student cleric's surface shimmered with a deep, introspective hue. "Professor," they said hesitantly, "if humans can endure even the Forge, how could we ever hope to fully comprehend them?" Valthick's antennae twitched as he considered the question. "Perhaps it is not our task to fully comprehend them. Instead, it is to learn from them. To recognize that their strength lies not in their biology alone, but in their choices, their unrelenting spirit. Today, we have seen what it means to fight not just for survival, but for identity, for purpose." The students murmured their agreement, their awe palpable as they watched Jack's still form in the recovery chamber. His chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths, a testament to his endurance. In the recovery chamber, Jack stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. The faint hum of medical instruments surrounded him, their gentle tones a stark contrast to the chaos he had just endured. He groaned softly, his body heavy with fatigue, but his mind oddly clear. A familiar voice crackled through the intercom. "Lieutenant Carter, are you awake?" Jack smirked faintly, his voice hoarse but steady. "Barely. Did I pass?" "You did more than pass," Valthick's voice replied, a rare note of admiration threading through his otherwise clinical tone. "You have shown us something extraordinary. Rest now. You have earned it." Jack closed his eyes, a wave of relief washing over him. He had no idea what kind of academic debates or discussions his ordeal would spark, nor did he particularly care at the moment. What mattered was that he had done what he always did, faced the impossible and pushed through. As he drifted into a well-deserved sleep, the students filed out of the observation room, their conversations animated with a new sense of purpose. They spoke not just of Jack's feats, but of what it meant to embody resilience. The crystalline student clerics turned to their scaled peer. "Perhaps we have underestimated humans all along. They are not fragile. They are unyielding." Their peer nodded solemnly. "And they remind us of something we may have forgotten, the power of belief in one's own strength." Days later, the consortium's academic network was abuzz with reports and analyses of the event. Papers were published detailing Jack's neurological responses, his physiological resilience, and the philosophical implications of his victory. The Forge Protocol, once thought an insurmountable trial, was now synonymous with human determination. But for Jack, the events of the Forge were a reminder of something simpler yet profound, that even in the most extreme trials, what truly mattered was holding on to who you are. In a quiet moment, he reflected on the faces of his fallen comrades, the memories that the Forge had tried to twist against him. Instead of breaking him, they had become his strength. When he finally emerged from the recovery chamber, walking slowly but steadily, the students and staff of the Interstellar Academy were waiting. They stood in silent respect as he passed, their eyes filled with something new, understanding. Clerics stepped forward, their crystalline form shimmering with a vibrant glow. "Lieutenant Carter," they said, their tone earnest, "we have much to learn from you. Perhaps, one day, you can teach us what it means to be unyielding." Jack paused, meeting Clerics's gaze with a faint smile. "Maybe," he said, "but first, you've got to learn to stop giving up." The room erupted in laughter, the tension from days of grueling trials finally breaking. In that moment, Jack Carter wasn't just a test subject or a curiosity. He was a symbol of what it meant to persevere. As the consortium's brightest minds continued to study the implications of Jack's endurance, one truth became evident: humanity's strength was not just in their ability to endure, but in their capacity to inspire. And that, more than anything, left an indelible mark on the stars.